This is a review of the High Score, one of the first really good spring-powered air pistols in America, developed by Andrew Lawrence in the 30s and the 40s. He actually worked on it before the war, but couldn't really produce it until after the war because of material shortages, and obviously the war effort was more important than an air pistol at the time. So was produced in the 1946, 1947, in that area. But what's interesting about this pistol to me is he actually wrote a paper on how he developed it, and he was very systematic in doing that. And what he did was look at, and what you would normally do, bring in air pistols of the time and how can you make them better. And he looked really at four pistols mainly. The Diana, which I don't have an example here, but Diana was really just a shortened version of a break barrel rifle of the time, spring powered. You break the barrel, that drives the spring, put the pellet in, bring it up, shoot. Again, very simple design. He didn't particularly like that design because it made it for a very long pistol. He looked at the Zenit, and this is actually the pistol, an example of that pistol from the 30s. Had a very unique cocking mechanism that gave it some leverage by the way it worked. I'm not going to cock it, but when he tested it, and I've shot this too, it's not very powerful. So he kind of eliminated that. He then looked at the Wembley. He looked at a pre-war Wembley. I don't have a pre-war Wembley. I wish I did. This is the first pistol I actually ever bought, which is about an 80s, is made in England, Hurricane. But same idea. A Wembley would use the upper barrel and have that entire fulcrum to cock it. And with the barrel on top, gave him that ability. Pretty powerful pistol. The piston then went this way instead of the Diana, which would go the other way. But he liked the power of this. Then he looked also at the Haenel 28. This is the repeater, but he would look at the regular 28 that broke here. And this was not a very powerful pistol. The spring is behind the barrel. The barrel's only really 4 inches long. This was all used for the piston and the spring, just not in the way it cocked back here. Had very little leverage. Just did not produce a very powerful pistol. But what he liked about it and what he would take to his design, it looked like a firearm. And in his paper, that was one of the things he wanted. And I'm sure it came from this pistol. This looks like a firearm. And that's one thing that he really wanted to do, except improve it. So what he did was really went back to some of the old English designs that had the barrel, long barrel, but made it concentric. He put the barrel inside the piston. That's not a new idea. It was in some English pistols. A Warrior is one example, but what he did though was to take that and made it very sleek. That was something that was new. This barrel runs the entire length of this gun. And goes right through the piston and the spring. Not a new invention, but one that he took to a pretty high level by making it very sleek. And this pistol does look Luger-like. That was one of what he wanted to do. He also, in a sense, copied the Wembley cocking because he attached the barrel way up here. that gave him the entire length, and I will cock this in a second to shoot it, but gave him that entire length to give him leverage to cock a pretty powerful spring inside there. This is used a lot now, even that idea of leveraging way up here and getting that action. And he did get the power. I might as well demonstrate the cocking. One thing he did too, which was very cool, back here, because the barrel runs the entire length, he created a mechanism back here to seal the barrel and introduce the pellet. And it's like a little camera shutter that will open, put the pellet in, and close it. Very unique and very well done. So I'll demonstrate that. I'm gonna have to take it off camera to cock it, but you'll see as I cock it how that's the full extent of the range, and it is now fully cocked. I'm going to put a pellet in it, opening that up. Falls right in there. Twist it, it's closed, and it's ready to fire. The trigger, I'll go into that a little bit later, right after I do this, as far as the mechanism, but little travel, and then it breaks pretty cleanly. And quite a bit of power. This will do, I've tested this on a Crony 400 plus, a little bit over 400 feet per second, in the 177, which is this is. The 22, which he made as well, would do about 300. What's cool about this too, innovative, he wanted to improve the Haenel trigger, and the trigger sometimes, I think of the Wembleys as well, was sometimes pretty stiff. So to do that, you basically have a very tough spring. He created a servo mechanism that you cock. Now that it's detached from the sear, the trigger doesn't directly hit the sear or move the sear. This mechanism, it's now charged, cocked, hits the sear after a pretty light pull. That's very innovative, and it gave the ability to dry fire this. You can't really dry fire spring-powered spring piston firearms because you need that resistance to not to hurt the mechanisms. But this, you can cock that all day and dry fire it. Kind of cool. And that's another pretty cool innovation. All in all, he really, I think, thought it through very well and came up with a pretty cool design. Some of the other positives of this pistol, the bluing. I know when I saw this pistol, I thought, gosh, it's going to look cheap, because he did use a lot of stamped parts, the reduced cost. And you can see the stamping. This is a stamped piece down here. This is all a drawn tube. It's not milled. But he used a military grade bluing that is as good as a Colt. I was very impressed. This was I bought. It's about I think it was 1948, 1949 model. But it was like brand new out of the box. So I can see how it was when someone bought it, and that's really cool. Well done. The negative, and also another innovation which he used was the grip. They made a big deal at the time because GE developed it for him. Tenite, which is a thermoplastic, high-grade plastic, actually used in medical devices at the time, even now I think. Has kind of a feel to it, textured feel to it. Actually, very high quality. So they put in some thought into this. He did. The negatives, which kind of drive me crazy, to be honest, because love a firearm look and feel, which this has. But boy, you look at the trigger, and doesn't that look like a toy trigger? He used stamped, just curled it around there. Doesn't hurt function at all, not at all. But it just does not quite have the look of the Hahnel firearm trigger, does it? And if you look at some of the other things, the front sight here, a piece of sheet metal wrapped around, spot welded. Compare that to a milled, dovetailed sight of the Hahnel. And probably the worst aspect to me is this: the sights. The back side here is just ramped with little ramping here. This goes through here. Easily falls out, not easily, but you see some of these with this falling out because it's just held in there by the pressure. It works. I have no trouble actually with the function. I find, but it looks, to me, not the best compared to other, what you would want in a quality firearm or air pistol. But I have found this to be a very functional pistol, and besides those two things, or those three things maybe, very well made. Down here, I mean, this is solid. It really is, and I have to like the way it the piston jumps back here. To me, it's a lot more like a firearm, and I can get very good with it. And I hold this two-handed. Whereas on some, I use a very light grip. This one I use a hard grip. Could be different for other people. You kind of develop your own style, but I can get very, very accurate with it. Again, if you look at what he did when he slimmed down, there's so much going on in here with the barrel going through and the piston, but look how slim that is compared to the 28. And the real rival at the time, the Targ-Air, what the Targ-Air did was to keep the 28 brake barrel, and had to put the increased power, had to put all the power back here. And look at the size of that tube compared to the High Score. I love the way this is more like a firearm. I love how easy it is. I can take this apart in a second because it's one piston, doesn't have anything going through it. I've never had this apart. You got to take a ring out. It's not as easy, and a lot more going on. But if you look at the two, you can see these came out at the same time. This one went away very quickly. High Score one, and I think for reasons. It's a very good pistol. Well thought out, sleek, powerful, and cheaper to make, I think. I saw on the internet one of these boxed in an old box, and it had $18.50 on it, the Targ-Air. That's what this was going for at the time. And I don't think they could up their prices because this was a $19 pistol when it came out. And I think that squeezed them out because I just questioned whether they could make this for that amount of money, and they really couldn't. Given this pistol's quality, how much could they charge over it? So this one kind of went away quickly. This is actually, it's so funny on the internet. You'll see people say, a rare pistol, the High Score. It's not a rare pistol whatsoever. They made 200,000 of these. It was so successful over 20 years. So they're out there, and they're pretty inexpensive to collect. It's hard to find sometimes in this good a shape, but you have to be patient. But if you do, I think it's really kind of a neat example of a bygone era. And that's the High Score. Thanks for listening.